The day that many never expected to arrive is here, Sequester Day. Deep cuts in government spending are required by law because Congress and the President couldn't agree on how to rein in spending or raise more revenue. Joining me now is Democratic Representative Marcy Kaptur of Toledo. Congresswoman, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim.
So how is your district going to be affected by the sequester?
Well, much to my dismay, what will happen, it appears, though some of this may not happen immediately, but it seems to be coming, is that over 16,000 citizens in our region will lose about 10% of their unemployment benefits if they're out of work. It means statewide, those who serve us in the 180th Fighter Wing, as well as at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. There'll be over 26,000 Ohioans who will be furloughed for up to 22 days, I believe. We will see cancellations likely of major missions at NASA Cleveland Brook Park, of their cryogenic mission, which is a central part of what they do. This means jobs. This means contracts not being signed. This means people's lives being affected. I don't know what will happen at the Lima tank plant at the moment, but what's happening in the military is they are literally halting the signing of contracts, very worried about renegotiating contracts. Bottom line, it means less purchasing power in our economy, in our region where we're trying to continue to grow our economy. The head of the Fed, Ben Bernanke, estimates this will knock half a point off of growth and increase unemployment across our country at a time when we need more jobs. There will be thousands and thousands of people affected in our Head Start programs in our country. It's hard to say how many will come down into the Toledo area, into the Toledo region. We know in Ohio, about $750,000 more will be cut from our senior nutrition programs. I don't know what that means for seniors locally. It will affect teachers across our state. If you fly, the Transportation Security Administration that serves us in the airports will probably see longer waiting lines and so forth. This is going to ripple across the country, including in our region.
Okay, but in your view, who is to blame? Is it Congress? Is it the President? Is it the voters?
Well, I can't blame the voters. I do blame Congress. Obviously, I'm in one political party, willing to compromise, willing to put forward a balanced approach. The other party really has said, let's just do this. And the problem is it's not a balanced program. It targets programs that affect the middle class directly. Certainly those who are out of work don't need any more worry. They don't need any more stress. Those who are teaching our children at this important time in our country, workers going through retraining don't need to be told, sorry, we can't take care of you.
Yeah, well,
those who are dealing with substance abuse and treating those who are mentally ill don't need to have their budgets cut more. What's going on is that certain very powerful interests, such as those that offshore jobs and bank accounts to the Cayman Islands, the Wall Street big banks that put America into this mess, the hedge funds up there are taxed at 15% when most businesses in our region pay over 30% in terms of taxes. It's not a fair plan. Revenues aren't on the table and mandatory programs aren't on the table. Certain programs have been exempt from consideration.
But most people,
and this is really then falling hardest on the middle class.
Congresswoman, most people I talk with say you folks in Washington just can't do what we elected you to do, which is figure out a deal, somehow work it out.
Well, I can tell you the committee that I serve on, the Appropriations Committee, has been trying mightily. We only have 50 members. There are 435 members in this institution. We are trying to function in what we call regular order. That means the committees meet at subcommittee level. We develop the bills. We bring measures forward for full consideration. Those committees have basically been shut down. And a few deals were struck by those at the highest levels, the leaders of the Congress, without involving the membership, which means that the people that I represent, their voices aren't being heard. They're being stifled. And when you have such an imbalanced situation, process inside the House, you produce an unbalanced bill. And that's exactly what's happened here.
Okay, some people say just let the cuts take effect. We need less government anyway. What about that?
Well, that is what is going to happen, and they will see what occurs. And it is a very irresponsible approach to governance. We in the Appropriations Committee right now are working on a measure to try to rearrange by account for the remaining part of this year a more reasonable allocation of resources so that those who really don't need any more harm in their lives are protected. I don't know whether we will be able to move those bills forward as the month progresses, but the way these particular cuts have hit are very, very draconian to certain individuals. And you know, Jim, the problem is those that will be hurt are not people who generally have a lot of political power or lobbyists in this city. I'm their major lobbyist.
Right. Now,
and so I have to represent their interests.
Right. You've been in
and so
Congress.
Who knows which child who has a disability will be the one whose parents are told, sorry, we can't take care of your child this year. They just happen to be under the 5,000 that will be affected around Ohio, because those cuts will be felt across the system. Which teachers will be furloughed? We don't know. We just know it's going to happen. Which Head Start children will not receive early education? They are very, very untargeted and not very well thought through. It's like shooting yourself in the foot, you know.
You've been in Congress now for 30 years.
We ought to aim very carefully at programs and trim where we must. We've trimmed almost $2 trillion in spending, along with the revenue increases that have been imposed. But you can't overall cut your way to prosperity. You have to grow your way to prosperity. And with over 7.8% of the people in our country still unemployed, you can't balance a budget by throwing more people out of work. You've got to have people working, paying their taxes, helping to pay the bills down.
Now,
so to me, this is going backwards. We need to balance the budget on an annualized basis, and we're moving toward that. The deficit will be a smaller share of GDP this year than it has been in the recent past. So we're moving in the right direction, but it's likely this will increase unemployment around the country, and that means that we'll get bigger deficits, not small ones.
You've been in Congress for 30 years yourself now. You can exercise some influence, certainly, over your fellow representatives, and you have friends on both sides of the aisle. What can you personally do to help get this resolved?
Well, personally, I can work inside the Appropriations Committee to try to get our committees to function under regular order. Our Speaker, however, in the House doesn't like the Appropriations Committee. I don't know all the reasons, and therefore he has made it more difficult for the committee to function. Our chair, who is a Republican from Kentucky, Mr. Hal Rogers, along with the ranking member on our side of the aisle from New York, are working very hard to try to move bills in a regular order for the remaining part of this year. I see some glimmer of hope there because I know the Senate wants to do that, and we had a meeting this week of our Defense Subcommittee. We've been meeting on our Energy and Water Committee, so I'm hoping that on the committees that I serve and the influence that I can exert, that we can restore normal order to the House.
If you were to give odds as to when this might finally get resolved, when do you think it might happen?
Well, as far as the cuts, those will be enacted this weekend, and I can tell you already contracts are being cut. So, for example, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was in my office yesterday, and they were basically saying how many contracts simply are going to be held back. That means lack of hiring in the private sector. In addition to that, the uncertainty of what the budget will be for 2013 in many of these departments means that they can't carry forward with their contracts, and they're very worried that, in fact, the contracts they've already negotiated will actually have to be abrogated and renegotiated at a higher cost. This is not good governance. This is not managing your budget very well. So my hope is that through the work on our Appropriations Committee, if we can get the Speaker and some of the others who have been opposing him in his efforts to restore regular order, would allow us to heal the wounds that have been caused by this sequester and will be, sort of nicking the economy in many, many places as this spring dawns. So I think the hope we have is that inside our Appropriations Committee we can try to move the institution to more regular order.
All right. Thanks very much for talking with me. Representative Marcy Kaptur of Toledo.
Thank you.